our goal is not democracy. Our goal is Torah mitzvahs, but through Torah mitzvahs, you're destroying. Anyway, so that I think you see that in the story of Yud Beis Tammuz, and you see that in the trajectory. And I think that's an amazing. It's an amazing thing when you open your eyes to be able to look at it that way.
And it gives us a deeper understanding in the letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote, that the Rebbe quotes probably every Yud Beis Tammuz. That
Right.
Lo Yasi Bilvad Gal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only was I freed,
Right.
but Kol Mechav V'Tereseinu HaKadesha, Chol Shem Mitzvah, Chol Asher B'Shem Yisrael Yechuna. Every single Yid has a part in the miracle of Yud Beis Tammuz. That it's not just the Frierdiker Rebbe's personal imprisonment. I'm Yassi Kamen. Welcome to Among Chassidim by Der Herr, an ongoing farbrengen about life as a chassid, our vibrant connection with the Rebbe, and inspired living shaped by the way he teaches us each and every day. How are you, David?
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, doing well. I think it's afternoon, but it's after farbrengen last night. Maybe it's only the morning. So thank you for making the time to be here, and it's actually in honor of Yud Beis Tammuz. I felt it would be appropriate to have a conversation with you. You did some phenomenal work with your work Chabad.org on Yud Beis Tammuz, and I believe the premise of it all, and you can fill in, I believe the premise of it all is that the Rebbe said that the miracle of Yud Beis Tammuz was an open miracle, that there's a whole explanation that needed to happen specifically at that time when there was persecution and Hashem needed to show an open miracle. And on the other hand, there was also a nes monlubish beteva, that it was enclosed in the natural order. So I think what you've done is you've uncovered the behind the scenes of the natural order through which the miracle of Yud Beis Tammuz happened. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's about putting together the pieces that are already there. Meaning the Rebbe mentions here and there, he mentions a detail, and the detail is always a part of a much larger context. So when you see the larger context and you're able to see it, put it all together, then you're able to see all the story as it's told by the Rebbe, by the Frierdiker Rebbe. You're able to see it in a much clearer way because you have the context of everything that's going on around it that only magnifies everything that the Rebbe said.
Right. I think for most people that are familiar with the story of Yud Beis Tammuz, the way I was taught it, and the way most people know it, is based on primarily the Frierdiker Rebbe's writing. The Shem Meiser, and these works have been translated over the years. And
I think that Yud Beis Tammuz is not, kids don't really know about it very well, at least because it's in the summer and therefore they miss it. And the way that we teach about Yom Pagris and just basic events in Chabad history is whenever you get to it. So you get to Yud Kislev, you talk about Yud Kislev. You get Yud Beis Tammuz is in the middle of the summer. It's just not. It's half of February and maybe in camp. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what happens in camp, but I think that's part of what's missing completely is that no one gets to Yud Beis Tammuz because it's deep in the summer and whatever, it's color war. I don't know what's happening.
Right, exactly. And I want to mention that in the new book by the Herr, In Our Days, each Yom Pagra has, first of all, the story of that Yom Tiv, and then how it was commemorated by the Rebbe, and then the lessons and takeaways. And in preparation for our conversation, I reread that section and noticed not only is your work footnoted in the book, but the way we wrote it is actually influenced by your work. So I think let's get down to it. What was I guess we should start telling the story, and then we'll understand. What you uncovered, and
I think it's important whenever we talk about Soviet Jewish history, and this whole chapter is to break it down into, it's not all one thing. So usually you say a story from the 1920s, from the Pays, and you're talking about the Frierdiker Rebbe in Leningrad. it's told and spoken about in the same way about what happened in Tzadik Ches when people were arrested. When Rebbe Dovid was arrested in Tzadik Tes, it's spoken about the same way as what happened in the 40s and the 50s and 60s. And okay, at some point in time it got better, but like it's very, very vague. And so there's like 40 years where everything is treated exactly the same, which is not the case. It's a very fluid situation the entire time. So I think to be able to understand what happened in 1927 in Pei Zayin when the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested, you have to step back and see what's happening in the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union when it becomes the Soviet Union.
So you're saying that the Chassidim in Samarkand were not being persecuted?
No, they were being persecuted. Just it's a different situation. Meaning it's a completely different.
Okay, so what is the background? What was happening? So first of all, the Frierdiker Rebbe just recently moved from Rostov.
Right.
The Rebbe Rashab leaves Lubavitch and goes to Rostov, and there is the historical.
That's before the revolution. That's during World War I, right? So there was a revolutionary movement going on in the Russian Empire from already the end of the 1800s, right? So there's movement towards it. A lot of Yidden were involved in that rabble-rousing for revolution. It doesn't mean the Bolsheviks in particular. Later on, there was the Communist Party. The Communist Party was the Bolsheviks. They were, at some point of time, one small party of many parties joined under, like one segment of the Russian Labor Socialist Party, Democrat, I forgot the exact terminology.
There's the whites.
No. The whites are not part of this at all. The whites are the anti-communists. They're anti-all revolution.
The democracy.
Or monarchists. It's a whole mix of groups. They don't really have an ideology. They're just against. Mm-hmm. The revolutionaries are a whole bunch of groups that all have their own vision. There's the Bolsheviks. There's the Mensheviks. Famously, the Mensheviks were more popular than the Bolsheviks. Bolsheviks named themselves better. They called themselves the larger. The Bolshe is big, right? So we're the bigger section. And the Mensheviks were called the smaller one. Menshe, less. But really, the Mensheviks were more popular than the Bolsheviks. It was branding. So there's all these different groups. There's a specifically Jewish group, the Bund, which was socialist Jews who were into, everything was in Yiddish, and they were against the Zionists and against the Fruma, and that was so. These are all a bunch of groups that are all part of this together. There was a revolution in 1905, before the revolution in 1917, meaning before the actual communist revolution. So that led to a bunch of reforms. It failed, but it led to a bunch of reforms. And obviously, what happens when a totalitarian state, the Tsar was a totalitarian also, meaning he's in control of the entire country. So when he needs to give in to reforms, that already is sowing the end of his.
That's what happened at the end of communism, also.
Yeah, these reforms end up untying the entire thing. So then came 1917, came the revolution. Okay, that's the beginning of the revolution. The revolution is really part of. It wasn't a mass gathering of people. It was a coup. They made a coup in Leningrad, which was called Petersburg at the time. They made a coup. They took power in the capital city, and then the Bolsheviks, at some point in time, took control of that.
So
right?
after
the most radical group, the Bolsheviks are the most radical group, and the way that it works, this happened in Iran also. When the Shah fell, around that time, there's a lot of people who are against the Shah. But the most radical group, the Islamists, are the ones who ended up taking control because they're ready to do the most. They're ready to go to all ends to win, so they won. So that's what happened in Leningrad. And then there was a war. For a few years, there was a war, this Russian Civil War, from 1917 till 1920, 21. Tafresh Pei, Pei Aleph. And so the Rebbe Rashab left Lubavitch, right?
During World War
I. And he moved to Rostov. And all this happens during this time in Rostov. And we're not going to get into it, but like the Rebbe Rashab analyzes what's going on, what's happening outside. If you go to Rostov, there's the porch outside of the Yechidus room, where you can see where the Rebbe Rashab had stood and watching the marches of the revolutionaries on Bratsky You can see it's a small. Brodsky is a small street, and Balsheva Sadova is the street where they were marching, where the revolutionaries. So the Rabbi Shab is watching all this and commenting. No, I visited.
You visited, okay.
And so the Frierdiker Rebbe notes all these things down and writes them down for us. So from 1920, from after Beis Nissan, when the Frierdiker Rebbe becomes the Rebbe, everything's still in flux, but there are slowly the Bolsheviks who had taken control. They took control of what had been the Russian Empire, and they now have. But it took time. There was fighting. There was war. One of the first things that they're doing is communism. Until this time, is an idea. Now you have to govern, right? Now you have to govern as a communist. So what does that mean? So you have all these ideas which are good in theory, whatever, not good in theory, but I mean like are fine for them to have in theory, and you have to go implement them. So you have right away start taking away the farms from the workers.
What's the word for it?
Collectivization.
Yeah, collectivization.
Collectivization. So the bottom line is that they paused on it because it became a disaster very, very, very quickly. The Frierdiker writes very frequently about NEP, right? There was a period of time over there from like 1922 to 1926, something like that, where they were forced, the new Soviet regime was forced to allow a market economy. Small markets, yeah, they took away the big factories, they took away big things and they kept them, but you can't feed the people when I'm a farmer and I had a whole field and now I can't work the field because it's not mine anymore. So they gave it back. They said, make a small market economy, and people, there was food back on the tables. There was a small period of time where there was money again for Timchit Timimim. Like people had money because there was a market economy. The market economy makes sense. Right. Here they're trying to put everything in theory. Anyway, at the same exact time comes the war on religion. So that's
during this period
from the first 10 years of the Soviet regime comes the war on religion. You have to remember that the war on religion, it's not like a byproduct. It's part and parcel of the whole idea. So what's communism doing? Communism is saying we're creating a new universe, a new world. History begins from now. Everything before was meant to blind you. The religion was meant to, you're supposed to, like the clergy is blinding you in order that you should give them money to support their lifestyle, and they're keeping you down because you're like a sheep and you're the opium of the masses. All this stuff, this is basic stuff.
This is Marx. This is the theology.
Marx, and then Lenin goes even. There's like Rashi and Tesos, whatever. Like there's Gemara, Rashi, Tesos. It goes on, but Lenin is even more extreme about it. Right. He says everything bad is worthwhile. Is better than the subtle evils of religious thought, of spirituality, because they sense a danger in this. So it goes against the very basic of who they are, that the truth and world history, everything now begins at this point, and we're creating a new world, and that means that a lot of thousands of years of history, you're destroying all of that. A lot's going to have to be destroyed, right? The fact that nations live in certain places, that you own this land, you could have owned this land for 7 generations. We're gonna have to. This is gonna be very painful for you, right? But like for the greater good,
we have to restart.
We have to do. Everything has to be done again. So religion is a very, very key element of this. I think just in general, because I know a lot of time you hear like, I hate hearing it, but communism is a good idea in theory. It's not a good idea in theory. It's an evil idea in theory, and they're ready to do that work to put their theory into practice. Right. But it's horrible in every way, shape, and form. It's about equality of the end needs to be equal, right? The equality of results. So. There was a political philosopher named Hans Morgenthau. He came to the Rebbe actually a few times, and he corresponded. And he's buried in it's a whole like Balshamsky story. He's buried in Agur's in the first new chalka over there in near the aisle. So this Hans Morgenthau,
the one on the right of the
I don't remember. We just passed it now on the line by the aisle. So Hans Morgenthau was a political philosopher. He's a German Jew. He was the father of international relations as a academic, as a scholarship, as a field of academic scholarship. So Hans Morgenthau writes, and I think it's very, very interesting in terms of why are totalitarian regimes against the Jews in particular. So he has like this interesting formulation.
You just said that religion in general was the
religion in general, but the Jews.
They were
the Jews are. It's always the Jews in particular. It's always with everybody. It's always the Jews in particular.
Right. Yeah.
And if there's no Jews there, then they find whatever. Fine, but like. So he says that the Jews always had the Navi and the Melech, right? They had the king and the prophet. What is that? The Navi is there as a check on political power. So the Melech, the king, is political power. But where does true power come from? Where does the truth and power stem from? From the Eibishter. It comes from God.
Like Shalom Melech and Shmuel.
That's the Navi is representing that power, and he's always the one on top.
Right.
Ever since then, now you don't have that. The Jews represent the prophetic vision in the world. Right? That's what they represent. So
we don't have the Malchus.
Now in the world, this idea of the Navi is transposed onto the Yidden as a whole, and we are in that position, whether we understand it or not. This is the fact, and therefore, therefore, a totalitarian regime, any totalitarian regime, cannot live in peace with the Jews, consciously or subconsciously, because of what the Jews represent. And Soviet communism in particular, which says that truth stems from us, power stems from us, this is where it actually comes from, the existence of the Jews in their midst, it doesn't work. They can't possibly coexist. Which is in general, I think, a very good way of looking at it, because it means we're not talking about a Fruma Yid Nafka. Yeah, a Fruma Yid for sure. But it's just the Jew, as the neshama, as a person who represents his very existence. Anyway. So back to the 1920s.
But the Soviets didn't claim to be anti-Semitic, and there are in fact many Jews.
What different
involved.
Meaning? Okay, yeah, that's true. The fact. So. Yeah. Okay. So
some of the founders of
So
Trotsky.
First of all, there's certain things that are said usually by anti-Semites that the Jews did the whole revolution. It's not true. There was a lot of Jews involved in the general revolutionary movement. Because what do you mean? They're being oppressed over there in the Russian Empire for that period in particular. It's like the pogroms and Mendel Beilis and all these different things that are happening. So yeah, Jews were definitely involved with revolutionary activity. The Bolsheviks in particular, there was a few big names, Trotsky, Kamenev, Zinoviev, like the big names who were part of the Central Committee, and they were like very, very involved. But first of all of those who were involved from an early period with the Bolsheviks were not educated Jews at all. None of them. Not Trotsky, not Zinoviev, not Kamenev. They had no very, very poor Jewish backgrounds, like educationally. And then most Jews were not part of the Bolsheviks. So there's this statistic, I think I quoted it. It's like in 1922. The amount of Jews who were part of the Bolsheviks, part of the Communist Party, the Bolshevik Party, which eventually, which at that point was the only party left, that had been part of the party before 1917 was like 1,000. So we're talking not a large number in the big context of things. So they didn't. Now, after the revolution and after the Bolsheviks won, of course, if you were involved in the revolution before, you're going to be involved with it later. So that's where the Yivseksia comes in.
But your point of all this is saying
that
there's a reason why they're mahader in persecuting the Jews, because it's built into the subconscious or conscious.
It's built into the system, and obviously, meaning they handed it off. So in the 1920s, they go after the Jews in particular, and who knows the best where the Jews are and how to deal with it, and is interested in it to like a real degree. The Jews themselves, because they bought into this whole vision.
Right.
So that's where you have the Yivseksia comes in.
So the Yivseksia is the Jewish section.
The Yivseksia is the Jewish sections of the Communist Party. not everybody really, not all Bolsheviks, not all Jewish communists wanted to be part of the Yevsektia. They hated, meaning some of them hated the idea of the Yevsektia.
Why?
Because, what do you mean? We're fighting for the brotherhood of man. We're saying that everybody's equal, that it's class and not nation, right? So class meaning I'm a worker, you're a worker. Nothing makes a difference. Now you're telling me that I'm a Jew, I'm a Jewish worker, and therefore I have to work through this. So a lot of them didn't like it. A lot of old Bundists who had been they became part of the Yevsektia, and the Yevsektia B'Poel led the charge from 1920 until 1930. The Yevsektia is not a government.
Agency.
Body. It's a party. It's a part of the Communist Party. Now, the true power in the Soviet Union came from the party because this is an ideology. So the government is just the levers of actual power. Like they pave the road, they keep the lights on, whatever. The party is what controls the entire thing and what runs the entire thing. So the Yevsektia is a part of the Communist Party. They don't arrest anybody. They urge and file reports with the KGB, which then was called the OGPU, the GPU.
It's not the GPU, it's OGPU?
I think then particularly was OGPU, but it's the same thing. They changed it was called the GPU, then it was OGPU. I don't remember, maybe it was the reverse, and then it became the...
So NKVD and OGPU and KGB...
Yeah, they would restructure in some kind of way, and then like they make a new agency. It's not just a sign on the door, but more or less it's a sign on the door. So the Yevsektia doesn't actually do arresting. It tells the GPU, it tells the KGB, you go arrest those people, and they can come along with them for raids, and they can come because the party is the most important. Remember, Stalin. Okay, so where does Stalin's power come from? Stalin in 1920 in 1922. All right, now I'm blanking whether he. In the early 20s, he became the general secretary of the party. Okay? And he unites a massive party. He unites as like the central clearinghouse of all information. Everything goes through him. This is still during the lifetime of Lenin. And therefore, he was already put in this position, and a very, very powerful position, because he's the only one who knows what's going on in all parts of the party, which is slowly taking control of everything. And he's there, and then he doesn't have. He just has. It's like being on top of the mountain and having to fight defensively, right? You're defending yourself from the mountain. He's already in the position of power. So, but he's not a government. He's not like the president of the Soviet Union. He's the head of the party. And the party is what matters the most,
right.
In terms of political power. Now. So the 1920s, in terms of, because we started off, I think we were saying about the different kufas, the different periods of power, right? Meaning how things changed. So from 1920 until 1930, there were, in order really to take control of the country, to take control of different segments of the country, they came up with something which is really theoretically anti-Marxist. It was national kind of identity. So there's the Yevsektia, and other groups had their things, right? They had the Kyrgyzs and the Tajiks and the Mongolians. They have their own party. Mongolia wasn't formally part of the Soviet Union, but they were basically controlled. They have their own so it's a group, and Stalin called it, I think, national informed socialist in content. Right, so this is all one big part of. Now, in 1930, things changed, and he got rid of the Yevsektia. There's no Yevsektia after 1930, so that was the end of it.
Because ideally, this whole thing doesn't fit with the communist.
Yeah, and he doesn't need it anymore, and he expelled. Meaning the Jews had been very. Let's say we're talking about the Jews in particular. Good. You had it, and most of the Yevsektia was shot at the end of, by the end of the decade in 1938. Most of them were shot. A lot.
Lulav included?
I think Lulav was.
The ones that
Nachmanson was not.
Nachmanson
was not. I think Nachmanson was getting matzah from
Chabad?
From Chabad in 1993. Something
Really?
like that.
Nachmanson was alive till 1993.
Yeah, I think I have a picture of him.
Really? Okay. He's the one from that from.
He's the one that stopped them from
Rash.
opening from Nachmanson. This is what I remember hearing. It makes sense to me. that, I mean, we can't know, that Nachmanson, when during the arrest, he stopped them from waking up Rebbetzin Shana Sarah.
Yeah, and also he's the one that wanted to carry the Frierdiker Rebbe's bag, right?
Right.
That wasn't Lula, that was Nachmanson.
Yeah.
Because he said, my Zayda carried the bag so that I have Marash for your Zayda.
Yeah.
The Frierdiker Rebbe said that he carried it where my Zayda wanted to go. You want to carry it where you want me to go.
Right.
So, but Lulav was saying was eventually killed.
Lulav was killed, yeah.
Okay.
Lulav was, I'm pretty sure. I looked it up at some point. Yeah. Okay, so here
the Avsexia was that like they were like creating it was like propaganda, a lot of it, right?
Propaganda, they're the ones who took over the shoals.
So all the chadarim and some mikvahs being cemented that was
all the Avsexia. They made trials, they made show trials. They made a show trial of the cheder in Vitebsk, which is meaning a vikuach, like it's a show trial. It's not a real trial. It's they made the Rav defend the Rav and the community defend the concept of the institution of the cheder. There was a trial of the yeshiva in Rostov, and that's, I believe, that the money that the Frierdiker Rebbe's money, meaning the money of the Beis Harav, was taken away after that. I think that was 1922. I think it was Pei Beis. Rosenblum was defended it, and that's why by the Rashag's Chasna they didn't have. There was nothing there. They didn't have money.
Seized.
Everything was taken away after. If I'm not mistaken, it was right after the trial of the yeshiva. They did other ones, Bris Milah, whatever, like big public trials. Then they took over shuls. They chased away rabbanim. So they're not like left and right shooting people. Meaning even the Gepa'u, they're not. But this is really the decade when, before that, every single village had shuls, every town had shuls. There was their institutions, their infrastructure that was going on, a life that had been there for a few hundred years.
Right.
And
they
in 10 years, they went completely to uproot it, and meaning whatever. In some ways, they succeeded in some ways.
And I'm
obviously.
thinking that's probably when all the Fruma Yidden left Russia.
What do you mean the Fruma Yidden stopped being from? I mean, some people left.
A lot of Rabbanim and a lot of people.
Rabbanim.
Yeshivas left.
The yeshivas left.
There's little yeshivas that moved.
So the yeshivas, the institutions left 100%. It was only Tim Chitvim after 1922 or whatever, something like that. I think Navardik had something, and they left at the like early on. And the Chavetz Chaim, I think, was in. I remember hearing from somebody that the Chavetz Chaim regretted always that he left.
So I'm saying, but that's what I wanted to get to is that after they're going through this program of dismantling Yiddishkeit, and most of the institutions of Yiddishkeit basically just left, or Yidden that stay just whatever, they lost it. But
we're talking about 3 million Jews.
Right, but the Frierdiker Rebbe is the only one, literally
100%.
The only one that says, actually, I'm not leaving. And we're gonna make an underground.
100%. Right? That was never even a question. So the Frierdiker Rebbe established the Vad Rabbanei USSR of the Soviet Union, which was Zevin was on it, and meaning there was Rabbanim was an active organization of Rabbanim that built mikvahs, that trained Rabbanim. And with the idea of bolstering, meaning through chinuch, you have leaders for rabbanim sheikhim for villages and towns that need them, and they go out. And obviously, in the most, meaning the Yevsexia was the most powerful in the most Jewish places. So a town like Vitebsk, if you read about it in Sefer Zechenis, it's there for hundreds of years.
Right near
living
Lubavitch,
there,
right?
Yeah,
Vitebsk.
it's in the region. It's in Belarus. So in Vitebsk, Yidden were there for hundreds of years. They had massive. You can see what the Lubavitcher show looked like. A big 3-story, whatever. A big. The Yevsexia was tremendously powerful there. That's where they made the trial of the Cheder, because they have the power. Why? You have the most Yidden, so obviously you're gonna have such people there. I guess let's to fast forward to Yud Beis Tammuz in particular, to the circumstances around the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrest and what happened, and how you're able to see the nisim that are melubish and teva. because everything matches up so perfectly, so beautifully, that you look at it and you see like this picture emerges. And I said all this stuff about communist theory because the teva here is the teva of communist theory. Meaning it's happening within their worldview.
Right.
That everything is taking place, which I think is fascinating.
Okay, I don't understand yet what you're saying. I guess you have to say the story.
Okay.
So chronologically, we're talking about the Yevsexia is basically very successful.
The Yevsexia is very, very successful. There's tragic stories, meaning what happened to Rabbanim. They would go and they would put in the newspaper, their family wouldn't be able to get coupons for food, right? So then the Rabbanim, because it wasn't, being a rabbi wasn't considered a job, and if you're not, you're a parasite then, right? You're sucking off the system, so then you wouldn't get it. And then the family, and then the thing disintegrated very, very quickly. So the Rabbanim or the Sheikhim, anybody who's involved with the Klei Kodesh, they had to make like ads in the newspaper and say, I'm no longer doing this, right? I'm no longer a moil. Done. And now I work as an accountant in a bottle factory. So you have a lot of that, meaning, and it happens very, very, very quickly because their kids, whatever, it goes on. And you had from a people who specifically didn't tell their kids, didn't educate their kids, more than you can imagine. Who didn't tell them? I mean, I'm remaining a Frumiyid. I'm continuing to do what I did. Why should I burden this? What's going on around us is never going away.
So Mesiras Nefesh wasn't a given.
For sure not. What do you mean? Mesiras Nefesh? It's whatever. So that's it. I remember meeting a Jew on Merkei Shlichus actually, and in it was in Lithuania, and this guy's like, yeah, my grandfather used to say, I don't eat this because the Jews many years, were in Egypt and whatever, and we were in the desert, but you eat it, about like pig fat there. He was saying specifically, goes, why do I do this? I do this because the Jews many years ago did this. Well, that's good for me. You don't do it. So the entire Yiddish guy, he told him it's not for you. Not bad people, but this is the nature of what's going on. That's what the Frierdiker Rebbe is fighting against, and that's what the Frierdiker Rebbe is telling Chassidim, first of all, to send their own children to Cheder, and second of all, to go out to serve as Rabbanim and Sheikh, and it was dangerous. Again, some people were arrested and sent away, for sure. Meaning we know people who were sent away during that time. They could also be beaten in the street. You can be beaten to death in the street. There's a town kind of top. I was on Merkei Shlichus there too. So a town kind of top. There was a whole story with the head of the Yevsexia. The Frierdiker writes his name, Laser Levin, and he, I think they put a bacher and Tim Chetvim in a coma. So that's what's going on. It's like thug stuff on the street, and it's taking over everything at all times.
Right. And I want to say that it seems that the seeds for the Frierdiker Rebbe having Chassidim to work with to fight this battle was probably the establishment of Timchat Timimim by the Rebbe Rashab.
For sure.
But the Timimim were the ones that the Frierdiker Rebbe worked with, and then he made the bris with the Christus bris with the 9 Timimim. I'm saying this is the Timchat Timimim was the precursor.
For sure.
To wage the battle.
100%, which is exactly, we started off talking about the different revolutionary movements. So that's mamish. That's at the same time,
right?
Like this is all going on around them. Volozhin was closed down because they were all revolutionaries, whatever. So they left. Where's their? So yeah, 100%. That's what seeded the ability to fight. I think the Rebbe writes this in particular. It's an article in Kivitz Lubavitch where he writes out he maps out. I don't know if the Rebbe's name is on it. The Rebbe's name is not on it, right?
I don't know.
There's an article. There's an article in Kivitz Lubavitch which kind of maps out. It says it's about Yud Tammuz, but it's really about what happened before and the plan. The organized plan. Chabad, everything's organized, and we always have a plan. So by the Rebbeim, and you see the plan of the Bachrim being educated themselves and then going out and teaching and education as the tool to fight against And that all that leads up to Yud Beis Tammuz. Okay, so let's just get to Yud Beis Tammuz because that's what we're here to discuss. So 1927 is already a very, very tense time. During that year, Stalin, who had opponents within the party, meaning he was in a very good position, but Trotsky, we know, right, was seen as who is the heir of Lenin. Okay, so it's already very tense because of that. He's defending himself. So through the year, he's consolidating power within the party apparatus. In May, in May 1st, this is where we're going to start going through the dates. I wrote down the dates just because I think it's important because you see everything as May 1st, 1927, a Latvian delegation arrives in Moscow to begin trade negotiations with the Soviet Union. Latvia is a Baltic country, right? There's 3 Baltic countries, Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. They had been part of the Russian Empire before the revolution. And then during World War I, really, after World War I, they split off. They gained independence, and really because the Soviet Union they tried taking it, but they weren't strong enough. They hadn't built their own power base well enough to be able to keep control
in the
of it.
Soviet Union's eyes, Latvia belongs to them. Yeah,
for sure. That's like the Russian mindset always. Mm-hmm. I mean, we see that today.
Right.
Okay, you took it away from us because whatever, but we never lost it.
Right.
It's ours, and it feeds into like a bigger picture, which I think is very, very important. The Russians, the revolution is paranoid. This is like the nature, again, this is like the laws of, everyone said Stalin was a paranoid man. He was a paranoid man, but you have to understand how this actually works. What does Stalin represent? The people. There's a revolution that's made by the people. Who I'm not part of it. No, everybody, the people made a revolution. The people have the power. The people have control. What do you do with that? The party represents the will of the people. Mm-hmm. Okay? The party represents the will of all people. Whether you know it or not, this is your will because everybody wants this. We all agree. This is where everything is moving forward. The party is represented by the Central Committee. You have the Central Committee, which and the Central Committee is represented by the person of the General Secretary, the head of the party.
Stalin.
That's Stalin, or whoever it is later on. But Stalin does it to the most, the most effective. He's very good. So, if you made a joke about the revolution, or you made a joke about the party, really, in the mindset, you want to kill Stalin. Because Stalin is he is the revolution embodied. He's the will of the people embodied. It all makes sense. It sounds crazy, but to them it makes perfect sense. So the revolution being paranoid plays into everything that happens now in over the next few months with regards to the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrest. Is part of the fact that the revolution is a paranoid, and it's part and parcel of communism. So the same way that history led up to this moment where the people, and there's industrialization, and they have laws. History is a science, right? There's no no. History is a science, and it must develop in certain ways.
Like a pattern.
And it's a pattern. It's a law. It's H2O is water. Yeah, you take this and you take that, and it equals water. So these are the elements that happen. It doesn't, even what they said was supposed to happen didn't actually happen, but they fit it into their mindset. And this is like they're really they're able to, they say that they're able to predict what's happening next, right?
Among Chassidim is brought to you by Chassidische Der Herr. We live in a chaotic world, a world where for us Chassidim, as a seinu, lei ra'inu, we do not have the ability to hear and see the Rebbe on a daily basis. Yet we know that the Rebbe is very much with us, and the Chassidus Chabad is alive and thriving more than ever before. One needs to only tap into it. Chassidus Deher provides you and your family with the tools necessary to tap into all of this. Whether it's the monthly magazine, the way it all began, whether it's Deher books, Deher online content, and so much more. Men, women, and children throughout the world benefit and use these tools on a daily basis. Whether it's children enjoying the children's magazine that comes along with the regular Deher, or enjoying the children's podcast, whether it's Bachrim in yeshivas receiving the Deher, whether it's girls in high schools enjoying their hair club in their local high school. People all over the world and from all walks of life enjoy and utilize these tools and take advantage of it. If you're not already subscribed to the Deher Monthly Magazine, do so today at derher.org. That's derher.org. Deher is a dynamic organization which is committed to continue providing these tools, grow on a constant basis, and do all that we can to help this effort. Baruch Hashem, it takes a lot of resources and finances to make this all happen. You can be part of Deher through your financial support as well, through visiting our website derher.org, or through contacting us to setting up a meeting. Thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the podcast.
So during this time, their paranoia, they always have, so you have the revolution, and the capitalist countries want to crush the revolution. What's the revolution? The revolution is now the party, right? Is this country. So they need to. It's not like we fear that they want to. No, they have to. According to the way this works, the capitalist countries want to crush the revolution.
Right.
So now they're paranoid, but instead they're paranoid because they have to be paranoid. That's the way that communism works. So Latvia is one of their own former republics. So they're making a trade deal with the Latvians. Okay? They're particularly paranoid about their own former countries, the capitalists using their former countries against them. This is like the worst thing possible. Again, NATO expansion into Ukraine through we see it now also. It's like all these things make sense.
Right.
Okay.
So what was this trade deal about?
So the Latvian trade deal was a basic trade deal, meaning it was a complicated trade deal. Latvia had a problem. Latvia had been part of the Russian Empire and had deep water ports and for trade with and it's a country the size of West Virginia. They have nothing to send out. Right?
Because they had
been part of the Russian Empire, and they were Shire Berlin, right? Shire Berlin, who traveled with their Amarash, who's their Amarash's cousin. He traveled with their Amarash with the Yain Essex Metamtem. Yeah, right. That's that story when he went to Paris. Shire Berlin was in Riga. He was a wealthy man. He owned like 100,000 hectares. I don't know, something a crazy amount of woodland. He was based in Riga. He owned a crazy amount of woodland. He owned the mills that made the timber. The ships that took it down and that spread it out and that sent the wood, the lumber, the processed lumber to Petersburg, to London, to Hamburg. So he was a big veer. But where's this? This is all because Latvia is a part of the Russian Empire.
They're exporting the whole Russian Empire's goods.
Yeah, a lot of export. By the way, a lot of Jews also left. Meaning between 1880 and 1920, right? The Jews who were leaving the pogroms and coming to America, a crazy amount of them went through Latvia, went through those ports also on ships to which is why a lot of American Jews come from like Chabad territory because they came from in that area. Latvia is very close to Dvinsk is Latvia today. It's Daugava Pils or whatever, and it was, but it was actually historically it was part of Belarus, so like Yidden were allowed to live there. Riga was like Petersburg, that Jews were not allowed to live there. It was outside of the Pale settlement. Yeah. But either way, but it was very close by, right? And Jews were very involved with that trade. So now they don't have any place. They have nothing to trade. So the Latvians saw themselves and dreamed of being like a bridge between the East and the West. So after the revolution, the Russians didn't have, meaning they didn't have diplomatic relations with a lot of people, including the United States. There was no diplomatic relations with the United States until the 30s. Mm-hmm. So the American embassy in Riga represented Soviet, meaning their interests in the Soviet Union, because there wasn't one in Moscow.
Interesting.
During this time.
So they were they were friendly with Russia. I'm saying it was
whatever. It's like being friendly with the bear that wants to eat you. But yeah. But meaning they're right there. They have no. So why do the Russians want it? That's the question. And the very basic fact is they don't really care. Yeah, they had limited trade in other places, but what they really want is to sow discord between the three Baltic states, right? To get them to be fighting with each other. So that worked, by the way. This trade deal ended up going through, and Estonia never forgave the Latvians, and it caused discord. They're all three kind of in the same boat. They're different people, but they're very similar to each other, and they all hate the Soviet Union. They all hate the Russians, and as a group, obviously, you're always more powerful. So they were fighting over, how dare you make a deal with our mutual enemy, right? But the Latvians needed this deal. They wanted this deal. Anyway, but that's really the Soviet Union's goal.
Interesting.
Okay. Then, okay, let's just go through on May 12th, the British raided the Soviet trade delegation in London.
So they're meeting in London.
So there's the embassy. You can't raid an embassy because it's a diplomatic immunity. So they had a trade delegation, which it might have been the next door building or it was in a different place, whatever. They raided it over 3 days. They're saying that they're spies. That they're obviously they're engaged in espionage. That's like a basic fact. But they raided them. This is so the trade deal with Latvia had already talks had already started at this point. And the Latvian trade deal, by the way, in Latvia was very, very controversial because you don't have people are afraid. So some people want it because they want trade, they want material, whatever. They want the money. A lot of Yidden were for it because they were merchants and they want to do it, and but a lot of people were against it because they're paranoid.
But so these are the negotiations that are happening.
These are the negotiations. So then London. The British raid the embassy. The trade delegation, and then May 27th, 15 days later, they cut off relations. Diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union.
Britain.
Yeah. And it was, I believe, the largest trading partner of the Soviet Union at that time.
Okay.
This is a very, very big blow. Now, it's not, the Russians always talk about how there's people who are planning revolutions and whatever, meaning fighting against them, but it's not completely untrue that there was nobody out there who didn't want the communists out of there. So June 7th, right? So this is 10 days after the Britain cuts off trade regulations, diplomatic relations, including trade, obviously.
With Russia.
On June 7th, there was an explosion in Leningrad, in a party club somewhere. It was a bomb that was planted, and I think a few people were killed even. But it was like a white right anti-communist cell that had planted a bomb there. The same day, and this the Rebbe mentions on a number of occasions, the Russian ambassador to Poland, Pyotr Voykov, was assassinated on the train platform in Warsaw. He was there with, in the article that I wrote, there's a freeze frame because there's a short video that I found of him and Chicherin, who was I think he was the foreign minister at the time, the commissar, talking right, on the platform a few minutes before Voykov was assassinated.
Right.
Voykov was there to see off the embassy, all the embassy personnel, trade personnel, and embassy personnel from London who had been kicked out from London. So he's there because those people were expelled, right? Now that there's no diplomatic relations, we're done. You got to go home. So those people are traveling through Warsaw on the way back to England, on the way back to the Soviet Union. So he's there to see them off, and he was assassinated. This is like now, right? You cut off trade relations. So Stalin literally wrote it down. Stalin wrote, "I feel the hand of England," in Voikov's assassination. Right? And then the GPU is warning that war is coming. Like war is coming right now.
Between Britain and Russia?
That Britain is going to take France, who's going to bring in Romania. I can't remember all the organization of countries, and they're going to bring Latvia in also, of course, because they're going to use Latvia as a base to launch their war into us. They have to. This is a concept called capitalist encirclement. Like I mentioned, that they're paranoid. They're talking about capitalist encirclement. This is the rule.
So Stalin thinks that he's about to be invaded by all these countries.
Whatever. I mean, for sure, they're coming in to crush the revolution. That's what he sees going on all around him. Again, it's not him. It's the whole system sees it this way. They see everything matches together. That's not what was happening. Right? What was happening was random events. A terrorist killed what's his name, whatever. There various. Britain and France had no plans on invading the Soviet Union. That's for sure. But they see it this way, and they see it this way very, very. This is.
But it's total fantasy, or paranoia.
It's yeah, for sure. I mean, the same way that Marxist economics is a fantasy also, right? Supply and demand are things that are real, right? I make something, I need something, you make it, I buy it, and that's good, right? That's a market economy. It's fantasy to say that Marxist economics is like, I had a great uncle or something who wrote Marxist economic textbooks. It's just not real. Like whatever, you can write whatever you want in it. He didn't have a high pressure job. You can write anything you want because it doesn't actually. There is no Marxist economics. Yeah. So the same thing over here. This isn't true. That's not how people. That's not how countries work. For sure, there were. The Soviet Union had enemies throughout the time, but like what they're seeing in all these events is just plain out not true. But either way, they see it. So now they're upping the pressure in the capitals, meaning in Moscow, in Leningrad, which is not the capital. The capital was moved back to Moscow, but it was the pressure is growing in terms of what's happening.
So you're saying that the government or Stalin, his answer to this perceived threat is to hunker down and force the communist policies in Russia. That's what he's doing.
Now they're full on under attack.
Yeah, but
that's what they feel. What it's not right now. It's we need to go after all of our enemies because we have enemies within.
So all the counter.
Meaning we're helping the people abroad, obviously.
Got it.
So June 7th they start. June 7th that same day, and then June 8th they start putting in new rules, new laws. They reintroduced the troika. The troika is three, it's not a real court, right? It's like three members, like a Tarsan Darm, like whatever. Yeah, three people, and we shoot you, right? So they reintroduced that. They hadn't. Everything works with. Everything works with law. They had it in the beginning of the revolution. Everything works with laws there, right? You can't make decisions on your own. So everything, it's a laws-based country in some insane way. You can't make decisions. Everything needs to be documented. It's like overall, it's a bureaucracy that you never paperwork. So people don't. But so this is coming down from on top, and we're changing all sorts of laws. The Frierdiker Rebbe's masker Chaim Lieberman was arrested the same day. He was charged under a new law that was added. I think it was Article 58. I think 14. They added to the Russian penal code, like the criminal code, that day, June 7th. When Voikov was arrested. So they introduced all these emergency measures. In emergency measures, you start shooting people left and right. So now we have the mechanism to shoot people. You have a troika, right? You have come together. You're guilty. Shoot him in the back, which the Frierdiker describes the sounds of shooting at night.
In Spalerka.
Yeah.
In the jail.
And then a week later, it was June 15th, right? Which was Tesvav Sivan. The Frierdiker was arrested. exactly as part of this
One second,
complete
one second.
wave.
You're missing one point, that
Yeah.
the Efsektia was all of a sudden given power that they had not previously had, right? That's an important part of it?
The KGB was given power that they previously hadn't had.
Or not the Efsektia themselves.
I don't remember. Did I write that?
No, I think I know that. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't remember if the Sekset itself had got more power. The KGB, the Gepahu,
But who the ones that
Gepahu definitely got crazy powers
But
at that
who
moment.
arrested the Frierdiker Rebbe? It was the Gepahu?
Gepahu, yeah.
And the Efsektia guys were just accompanying them.
Yeah.
Nachman and Sin and Lulav.
I don't know where they worked, honestly. Nachman and Lulav, I think they were probably in
they were
the Gepahu,
Gepahu.
but like Sekset members, you have to be a party member also.
Ah.
I mean, you have to be a
Okay,
party.
so this
you have
is
to be a
why.
party
So that
member.
they're cracking down overall. So many people were arrested that night. Probably.
Yeah, for sure. You can go, there are lots and lots of people. But, like we said, why the Frierdiker Rebbe? Why the... Because he had... I brought it down in newspapers, but you obviously know on your own that the Frierdiker Rebbe is having a big impact in Leningrad already. Meaning just in Leningrad, just in the newspapers had already been rabble-rousing about his presence in Leningrad, that it's not just Chassidim who are coming to him, that it's workers, it's people, it's general. Again, it's not so black and white there. Who's a worker and who's a Chassid and whatever. That's like over here everything becomes black and white. But still, he was having a very visible impact in Leningrad, and they know what's going on abroad.
That the Frierdiker Rebbe is
Meaning
running.
throughout the country.
He's running the underground.
100%. And also, and this is where. Why are they going after Chassidim? It's not just because they're from Yidden. Why they're going after the Frierdiker Rebbe and everybody associated with the Frierdiker Rebbe. I think that's the better way to put it. It's because it's an organization. And again, it speaks to the same paranoia that we're talking about. It fits their wildest dreams that there is an organization of people that is out to get us, that is fighting against the revolution. They don't educate. I saw this in a KGB document. Yeah, they don't educate their kids in our schools.
The Frierdiker Rebbe campaigned against that. Yeah.
So, but they write. I saw a document from later, from like from the 40s. There was the Baal Shem Tov, Israel Balshemsky. I don't know. Magen Mizrichsky for sure. They write Magen Mizrichsky, and then there was Zalman. Did they write Schneerson? Whatever. Anyway, the Alter Rebbe, and then the tzaddik today is in New York. His name is Schneerson, and he left behind. He has followers over here who follow his orders, and they don't educate their kids, and they don't put their kids in school. They have their own. They have their own schools, yeshivot, and this is like the that's the way they look at it. So and it's counter-revolutionary. I mean, they're fighting against revolution by this very act, because if you don't put your kids in the school, that means that you're against our schooling system, which means that you really want to fight against the entire thing. You want to crush the revolution. So Chassidim as a group are perfect for this type of thing, because they're looking for not an individual. They're always, even individuals, they're always trying to tie with a group. Because if it's a group, it's a conspiracy. Conspiracies are fit their worldview much better than just an individual crackpot or an individual whatever. That's not so interesting. You're part of a group. And there was a separate charge in the Russian criminal code. There's Article 58.10 and there's Article 58.11. Article 58.11 is about being part of a group. And that one was much more dangerous. Meaning, during certain times, Chanya got charged with Article 58, 10, and 11. But if you're charged with 11, automatic death sentence during that time when they were just shooting left and right. Okay?
11 is what?
Was part of a conspiracy, a group conspiracy, that you're part of a group. Yeah. That's an automatic death sentence. That was later. That's 10 years later.
Yeah.
Like everything built up. That's why the Tkufas change. There's periods that change. It built up. So during this time, we're talking really at the consolidation of Stalin's power, right? Stalin, when the Frierdiker Rebbe is being arrested, Stalin's not like he's basically in full control, but it's not the same Stalin as 10 years later. People who had been his opponents were still around. He controlled things politically, but Trotsky, Zinoviev, Kamenev, these guys who he got rid of later on, put a bullet through their heads. They're still part of their losing. but like he's consolidating power right now, and that's when all of this is happening. So obviously, so the emergency situation, all of these things are part of his own consolidation of power. Again, it's not a personal thing.
Right.
It's for the people that you need. Meaning, we need this. This needs to happen.
The charge of the Frierdiker Rebbe was this 11 also.
No,
Is there documentation?
I don't think we have. I don't think we have the
indictment.
The actual charges of. I don't think we have it.
Okay.
But the Frierdiker Rebbe was arrested. Then there was people being shot. Literally that night, June 14th, overnight. I think I June 14th and 15th, whatever. That's what I remember seeing, like people being shot specifically during that, and it continued. That like
any other Rabbanim
extra emergency. Not that I remember. I meaning, what do you mean? Chanya was arrested then, or he was already in jail?
No, you said 10 years later.
No, he was arrested twice. He sat for 3 years then.
Okay.
And Chaim Lieberman was arrested, and there were more people. I don't remember now.
I think in our sources it says that there were non-Jews that were killed.
For sure.
Night. Yeah.
For sure. That same night.
Yeah.
Yeah. They were shooting people at a like a hectic rate at that time. Which again, later on, that became more normal. At this time, it's still not so normal. Just shooting people left and right.
Right.
So that was okay. Fine. So now the Frierdiker Rebbe is arrested, and then how it plays out. They right away, Chassidim, they made committees, one in Moscow, one in Leningrad, about what to do about this.
I mean, first of all, they were like the Rebbe was like hiding the documents. Then that night, that was a whole operation.
Right. I think in general, there's a famous thing, but I think it's very, very clear that the Rebbe's role in this is understood, right? It's not. There's much more there. And we don't know it. There's that story with Zalman Duchman that Zalman Duchman said, got up and said, it's now time that everybody knows what the Rebbe did, and the Rebbe started like the Rebbe shushed him, or whatever, yeah, and then he never spoke about it again. But I think that's very, very clear, because there was a lot of steps that they did that were very, very. I think they're very smart moves, and who did those? I don't know.
But there's also things that like they prepared also, like they had documents on the Frierdiker Rebbe's desk. They put mundane documents in between the incriminating ones, so that they'll have a hard time searching. There were certain things that they did that they prepared for this also. That's.
I mean, whatever. I don't remember that detail, but the bottom line is that they don't need whatever. They don't need excuses, really. The Soviets.
Right.
That's the other thing. It's like we never actually tricked them. Whenever you hear the stories about how Lvov, everyone escaped, it was a brilliant operation. You might have tricked a guard on the lower echelon. Somebody knows though. I mean, this is a country where there's millions of people whose job is to know everything that you're doing at all times. They don't miss this. And the Rebbe says this. Vav Tishrei, I think, in the early memes, the Rebbe speaking about Rebbe Tzchana escaping. They know it happened, but like somebody there, somewhere up the chain, not too high up, does know, right? So they don't need excuses to go after somebody. They don't need whatever. Like it's part of their. They'll give. There's a famous thing: 3 felonies a day. That in the Soviet Union you can't go. There's so many laws on the books. You can't go through the day without committing 3 felonies.
Right.
So then we always have something to get you by. So they made these 2 committees. One in Leningrad, one in Moscow. Rashag went to report to Moscow what had been discussed over there. Very early on, somebody connected with this Madame Peshkova, who had been Maxim Gorky's wife. Maxim Gorky was a famous Russian writer who supported the revolution, came back to Russia from living abroad, and was a very, very big figure until and she was his ex-wife, and she headed this thing called the Political Red Cross in Russia, and they didn't trust. They didn't touch her. I don't know why. They never.
What does that mean?
her.
What's Political Red Cross? Like
It fights for political prisoners.
And they let her be.
Yeah, she was around, and she had this extraordinary power for some reason, and meaning extraordinary power, extraordinary influence, and without being touched, meaning like they didn't touch her, although her family wasn't untouched, but she lived until the 40s maybe, and so she got involved very early on, and it's very clear that the death sentence that was in the beginning that the Frierdiker Rebbe had seen, that was her efforts.
She thwarted.
Yeah, the death sentence, and then again changing because the next sentence after that was 10 years to Solovki, and that was quickly
the 3 years in Kostroma,
and then that was already to the 3 years in Kostroma, which but Kostroma is not so far away. I mean, it's like 7 hours away from Moscow, I think. I mean, it's relatively close. It's not like in
Siberia. There were Jews there also.
Yeah. So that's what happened. Now, the news in the West, and this is very interesting, that they made the decision very early on. I mean, there's three steps towards this thing, right? First is to get involved, get in contact with the KGB, with the local GPU, with the local KGB. Not go to Moscow over their heads. Deal with the small powers right here who are actually the ones who did it. Number two is go over their heads to Moscow and go to a higher leadership. Number three is already go abroad, right? And spread the word around the world.
Make it an international outcry.
And they made the decision early on, and I'm saying they, I don't know, there's who exactly was involved is very, very clearly the Rebbe was involved over here. And I can't tell you exactly what. So they did the first one, but very, very quickly they already heard, right? They heard the rumor that the death sentence is on. So then they sent them. They sent somebody on Shabbos. I think they sent on Friday night. They sent somebody to Moscow to say we have to move up. He got there Shabbos morning.
It's mashma from the Shemus HaMeiser.
Yeah,
the Frierdiker Rebbe has a whole thing that he went to the wrong door.
That they were shooting people that night, right?
Yeah, it's almost. It sounds like they wanted to do it that night when he was arrested.
Yeah, it's very, very possible. But they still didn't. Meaning, even after that, they didn't. Apparently, they didn't forget about it because they were still within the next few days. This was still something that was on the books. So
they eliminated the first hishtadlus of going to the local GPO. Okay.
Right, that was already out. Then they went over there. About getting international support, and this is to me it seems that, and I didn't realize this until I don't know, a few years ago when I was looking into the details. In the West, they did not know about it until very, very late. Meaning, outside of the Soviet Union, people did not know about the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrest until the Frierdiker was arrested on June 15th. Yeah, on Tezvav. The first major report is June 28th, which is Chav Chasivan.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first major report. That's the JTA, and that's what went around the world. The JTA was based in Riga, and they had an office in Riga, and I think they might have had somebody in Leningrad also. I don't remember if he was there. Either way, whatever. The first major report. It could be a day or two. I think I just recently saw in a newspaper, like a Polish newspaper of some kind, maybe a day or two earlier than that. But basically, the death sentence, all that stuff they didn't know about it in the West for 2 weeks, basically.
So,
Yisrael Jacobson, there's a letter, Yisrael Jacobson writing to somebody else in America. It's after that point. He's writing about the news of the Frierdiker Rebbe's arrest. that's Chav Chesivan, whatever, or a day later, 2 days later, like that. He saw, I think he references in particular the JTA report. So they didn't know about it. So that means that other people who were very, very influential and helped and that we know about, for example, Mordechai Dubin in Riga and people in Germany, but the Kramer brothers sending money from America, all of that didn't start for the first 10 days, 2 weeks really. Nobody knew about it.
So they went to the. What happened when they went to the KGB? The higher ups in the KGB. What did that do?
That already, meaning they that's already bringing in Madame Peshkova, who gets involved with them, and then that stops those things. But it was not going to happen on the local level in Leningrad. It wasn't going to happen on the local level in Leningrad, and then later on, the local level was still upset.
Right, but that's how they thwarted the death sentence with Madame Peshkova going to the higher ups in the KGB. That was what they did there.
Right. I mean, to the higher ups. Yeah, very very higher ups.
Okay, but the Frierdiker Rebbe is still imprisoned or going to be going to Galus.
So then he went to Galus, right? But you see, I think I quoted Rav Kook's telegram to the JT to the joint in America, saying you need to do something.
What does he say?
He says, Rabbi, Schneerson, whatever, but very, he was a friend. Needs deliberation, I think. Wire results, whatever. Emergency. The date of that is June 29th. And then you see in the joint archives, you see there's lots of telegrams. There's shuls, all these Tzemach Tzedek shuls, whatever, Nusach Hari shuls from all over the United States. They're all they write. There's a lot of them that have they write. Rabbi Schneerson arrested, held Petropavlovska fortress, or Peter and Paul. That's where the Alter Rebbe had been held. Stam. They a lot of them write. They're mixing in already right away.
All the trauma.
Okay, yeah. So So those anyway. That's already when basically. So Gimel Tammuz, the Frierdiker Rebbe left. That's July 3rd. The dates, I think, over those 2 months are exactly English and Jewish are exactly aligned. So Gimel Tammuz, I think, is July 3rd, and that's when the Frierdiker Rebbe went to Kostroma.
So that's in the whole.
That's already the whole world knows about this already and is going crazy about it, and there's a lot of mixed information. There was I think July 1st or Shchedesh Tammuz. There was the JT has a report that there was false rumor that he had been released, and then everyone started celebrating, and then afterwards they realized that it wasn't true. So they started.
In the book we have a picture. I think it was also in your article. That the Frierdiker Rebbe idenu nitfas b'maiser. He's still in jail. It's not. Right.
That was probably a report. I don't know the date. You remember the date of that?
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. So that's there was all this confusion, but that's when everybody gets involved. Okay. So now just to move it along to the trade deal, because that's really meaning the outside.
So you're going to talk about. Now you're going to talk about Mordechai Dubin and the trade deal.
Yeah.
But what about the American Hishtadlus? Did that do anything? Wasn't Justice Brandeis involved in?
The American, I think practically the American help was mostly money, I think by the time, and there was probably, you have to remember that really all of these efforts were not really, it was too late in the game to get him out of prison. He was already out of prison by the time they found out. Right? If June 20th, if Chav Chesivan is when the news gets out in the West that he's arrested, and Gimel Tammuz, he's already on a train to Kostroma. It's not a lot of days over there, right? Then 10 days. So they start doing things, but he's already halfway out. Meaning a lot of things have to happen. So I think the most of the efforts really that all came together during that time was really was to bring the Frierdiker Rebbe out of the Soviet Union. In the probably to out of Kostroma. Also, it already helped that there was this American pressure. Bora. Right, William Bora was the senator from Idaho who it's very interesting was influential. I think the Kramers got Bora involved, and Bora was like a very early lead proponent of the United States forming diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union.
Right.
And later on, you see his name comes up frequently, and like they knew who he was in the Soviet Union. They know who Bora is because he was the head of the Senate Foreign Relations.
You see, their plan was get the Frierdiker Rebbe out of Russia. That's what they were thinking.
I mean, whatever. They want to get him to safety, and over the summer, it became clear that's really meaning the only option. I think the Frierdiker Rebbe didn't want that.
After the Frierdiker Rebbe
after
he was freed.
Yeah, so the Frierdiker Rebbe was freed. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe, right? He went for 6 weeks. He was in Malachivka, which is a small town near Moscow. And
I think he said when he left that I didn't really leave.
Even later, yeah,
he said,
yeah, for sure, 100%.
One of the integral components of being a chassid are the Chassidish Yom Tovim and Yom Pagra. Whether it's Hey Tevis, Yud Shvat, Yud Aleph Nisan, or Gimel Tammuz. These days give us an opportunity to connect with our Rabbeim, to connect with each other and be better chassidim. What is the story behind each of these days? How did the Rebbe commemorate and celebrate these days? And most importantly, what are the lessons, the takeaways, and the action items Hamaisa Hua Ikr needed for each of these days? All of this and much, much more are answered in the new set recently published by Der Herr. Our Days is a journey through the Chabad calendar in story, meaning, and practice. With over 700 beautiful, glossy pages with elevated content, beautiful, beautiful photographs, you, your family, and friends will enjoy and live with each Chassidish Yom Tov. This book is a must for every Lubavitcher home, for every shul, for every school. It is a perfect gift item. This will not collect dust. It will be used day after day, month after month, year after year. You can have this set. Go to derher.org/Our Days. Order your set today and start living with Chassidish Yom Tov. So the way you understand it, the actual release, the most effective part of the Frierdiker Rebbe's release was this we're going to get to now, the Latvian. We're going back to where we started with the trade deal with Latvia.
Yeah. So the trade deal with Latvia, every one of these pieces is obviously very, very important. Meaning all the efforts that were made by the committees, by getting to Peshkova in order to be able to do that. Whatever pressure that came in, even when the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Kostroma, those are meaning. There's letters and telegrams and things did start happening right away. Then, 100%. So Peshkova's work was very, very important. The telegrams, meaning the pressure that came from America, that came from Germany, that came from other places already, just of deep concern coming from abroad.
It's a buildup.
Yeah, so those are all very, very important things, and obviously played a part in Yud Beis Tammuz, which is the Frierdiker Rebbe being allowed out of.
The communists care about pressure from the outside. That's something that bothers them.
Sometimes, meaning, in this situation,
they were not expecting a world.
In this situation,
backlash?
they were in this situation where it's a difficult financial situation at that time for them. Remember, the joint, right? The Jewish
distribution committee.
the Joint Distribution Committee, right? The American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee sank millions of dollars into the Soviet Union at that time. Meaning the equivalent of like $200 million of today, they sank into the Soviet Union, which doesn't have a lot of money. Meaning, they cut off all debts with the Soviet Union had announced when they took power that they're cutting off all their obligations to whatever the Tsar's obligations were to other countries. They're done and passed. And that means everyone cut off their obligations back to the Soviet Union. Whatever it was, meaning they're starting from a place of a lot of countries cut off relations with this revolutionary state that they're actually afraid of. The United States had diplomatic relations with the Russian Empire, right? And they don't have with the Soviet Union. So yeah, for sure, there's a lot more elements of the ability to influence what's going on within the Soviet Union at that time. So I think in Das Tachten, when you're looking at this whole story, this is 1927 and not 1937. So whatever happened in 1937, 1938, right, which is when Chanya was arrested, when people were arrested and shot, Chassidim were being shot like very, very quickly, Shmuel Nimaiten, whatever. There were many people. At that time, it's a totally different story. They don't care, and they're doing what they want. And meaning, again, obviously, Yud Beis Tammuz happened at its time in history for a reason. But if you'd say, like, if this whole story had happened in 10 years later, outside pressure would not have meant the same thing even remotely. It wouldn't have meant anything at all. Okay. They were doing this on a much grander scale, on a big scale. They had no at this time. There's things that matter to them. Yeah, for sure. So it's financial. It's also just getting it, meaning they're figuring out how to be a country in the world. So that summer, the Frierdiker Rebbe is released, and he's there. Mordechai Dubin was a Lubavitcher Chassid, was born in 1889 in Taf Reish Mem Tes in Riga. His parents were Lubavitcher Chassidim. Nobody's really from Riga. Yidden aren't really from Riga. They're from, like we said before, they're from White Russia, and they came up. At some point in time, like 40% of the Jews living outside of the Pale of Settlement. Pale of Settlement is where the Jews were allowed to live under the Russian Empire from like the second partition of Poland, whatever, like in the late 1700s to the end of the Tsar's empire, meaning till 1917, Jews were allowed to live over here, not allowed to live over here. And then there's some certain cities within even the Pale of Settlement, like Kiev, where Jews were invited, not allowed to live, unless you had a special permit. So Petersburg, right, Jews weren't allowed to live there, except if you had a special permit, which meant that you did a certain amount of business, whatever. There were things. There were obviously Jews who lived there illegally and would have to leave and have to come back, whatever. There those types of things. Riga was outside of the Pale of Settlement, but they contributed greatly to trade. Like we mentioned, Shai Berlin. They were very, as merchants with the world, and therefore they looked the other way, the Russian government, and also they gave them permission. And at some point in time, it was basically like 40% of Jews living outside of the Pale of Settlement lived in Riga itself.
So Mordechai
Dubin's parents came there around 10 years before he was born. His father was from Chashnik. It was like a shtetl, a Chassidish shtetl. There's stories associated with it, whatever. And so he was from there. He was Lubavitcher Chassid, the Frierdiker Rebbe describes him as like it's ein Chassidischer Bren, like a very, very Zalman Dubin. This is Mordechai Dubin's father. And
by the Rebbe.
So that made him different than most Chassidim, let's say most Anash in Riga. Riga is a very modern place. So the people who were there, even if you went to the Rebbe, that didn't actually mean, it didn't mean that you were fully committed to the whole thing. Like your kids were. Mordechai Dubin, he had a Chassidish upbringing. Him and his brothers, for sure, they didn't go to Shkola. They didn't go to, it wasn't Shkola as in like Soviet schools, right? But they didn't go to gymnasiums and have a secular education. Mordechai Dubin didn't have a secular education until he was 16 years old.
Did he go to the Rebbe? He went to the Rebbe in Russia?
He went with his father, yeah. Meaning he would go to the Rebbe Sham. He would go together with his father. Meaning his father would go however many times a year. Remember, it's the Russian Empire; it's all one country also. So they would go, and Zalman Dubin was wealthy. And Mordechai Dubin became involved with basically Askanos very, very early in his life. So already during World War I, I think even before World War I, right near Riga is the beach, the seaside, the Baltic Sea, Yidden used to go there from all over. So wealthy people used to go there from all over the Russian Empire. It was like there was a Jewish vacation area over there. Yeah, basically. And I think there was like a Goyish part of the strip, and there was like a Jewish part of the strip. And a lot of Yidden were sent there by their doctors also. So Mar Chedubin would from like a young age would fundraise money to help the Rabbanim, whatever, who had been sent there. They're prescribed to go to the beach, right? To go sit there by the water for the air and whatever. And so, but they don't necessarily have the money for it. So he would collect money. So that was like his first askanas, and he didn't really have to work because he was involved with his father's business, but whatever, it was a big business, and he was involved with askanas already from that time, but really from his 20s, he was already like a newly married man, and he during World War I, a lot of Jewish leaders left Latvia when during World War I, Latvia was sent back and forth between this side and that side, and then the Germans, it's famous, the Germans lost World War I, obviously, but they lost on the Eastern Front. They won on the Western Front. So they won on the Western Front. That means that the Germans established power in Latvia and along their western border. Then they lost. A little later, they lost on the Eastern Front, and then everything collapsed. Right, and then it was like a land grab. Mm-hmm. But they won over there. Anyway, and then when that collapsed on the Eastern am I getting my directions right? No, Eastern Front. I'm sorry. They lost in the Western Front and they won on the Eastern Front. Sorry. So on the Eastern Front they won the war, and then everything devolved into the Bolsheviks came in, and then because now the Bolsheviks signed a treaty, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and there they said we cede everything to the German Empire, right? Whatever was won, we're not party to this war, right? So whatever you guys won, whatever, we don't represent the Russian Empire, right? We're the Soviet Union. It's a new entity, so we're done. Okay. Then the Germans lost. Then they started coming in because now that treaty doesn't actually exist anymore, right? So they came into Latvia, and Latvia was very, very bloody. There was a whole back and forth, and of different regimes that were in control. It was a very, very dangerous time, and the leadership had escaped. A lot of people were gone. And Mar Chedubin stood up and represented the Yidden to the extent that when this cleared up around 1919, when this cleared up, and there's a lot of dangerous story, a lot of Mesiras Nefesh, like actual Mesiras Nefesh. When this cleared up, he was chosen to be on the first National Assembly of the newly independent Latvia. Okay, there had basically never been a country called Latvia before, but there's a distinct Latvian people. These are our boundaries. These are our borders. Russian? Did he speak Russian?
No,
they spoke Latvian. No, they speak Latvian.
Latvian, okay.
I mean, they speak Russian because they were.
They had their own language, okay.
What?
They had their own language, though.
Yeah, for sure. They're a separate people. They spoke Russian because they were dominated by Russia for 200 years before that, and then later on as well. But so he represented so he was chosen to be on this assembly. Then they made an elected assembly, and he was voted on to represent amongst the Jewish representatives who were on it. And at this time he's like 30 years old, and from there, when they established already a proper parliament called the Seima, so he was voted on. He represented Agudas Yisrael, but he's a Lubavitcher Chassid the whole time. He always had a beard. He davened b'avoda on Shabbos. He during the week he didn't because he had work. He had work to do. He had on a regular basis he had 150 people waiting for him in his office. You see eyewitness reports of people who were there and describing how there's Fruma Yidden and Frierdiker and people here lining
Wasn't
up.
he also running the education?
No. He represented Agudas Yisrael. He was
government.
One of the leaders of Agudas Yisrael as a political party. He's also Agudas Yisrael of Latvia.
And they were part of the government, part of the parliament.
And he had a political party, meaning Agudas Yisrael he was the Rasha Kal. Different. There's the Kehila. He used the Rasha Kal of the Kehila. Agudas Yisrael is like like a social services and whatever organization, and they have a political party, and he heads the political party.
In Poland, they had it too.
They had it also, but in Riga, everything's very different. Latvia, Bichlal, everything's very different because in those places they have there's a Haredi constituency in those places. In Poland, in Lita, right? They have Haredim. Riga didn't have Haredim. It's a modern place. It doesn't have a deep Jewish history, right? Because it was outside the Pale of Settlement. So it's not like Yidden are living here for 500 years. This is very, very little that had been developed. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe talks about Latvia, like, what's your excuse for not being an active place? Look, but like the fact is that Jewish life had developed very, very late comparatively to everywhere else, and the people who were there obviously were not looking for whatever. It didn't have Haredim, basically. It had a few of them, but it wasn't not. Marcha Dubin was regularly, Agudas Yisrael was regularly the most popular political party. I mean, it got a plurality of the Jewish votes because people wanted, they loved Marcha Dubin, who helped them. He helped everybody, and he helped people who hadn't voted for him also, in particular. Again, like the Rebbe speaks about politics in Eretz Yisrael and how it works and how each political party is there to serve only its constituency. Well, themselves. Their constituents, the people who vote for them. Mm-hmm. For somebody that works, for Lubavitch that doesn't work because we don't have it. We're here for everybody. You see that with Marcha Dubin in Latvia. You see the approach of a he's leading a political party. He ran campaigns and he said, vote for me because they didn't help you and I help you. But he helped them and he helped everybody and he helped people who did not vote for him in particular. And this was known, and this was even his biggest political opponents were always, and for the rest of history, always begrudgingly acknowledge that's the fact. They didn't like the tactic of it because what do you mean? You're getting favors, and really, according to democracy, which is what we're trying to help build, then these are our rights, and you're getting them as favors. So you're trading things, whatever. That's a different conversation. But he helped everybody all along. So it's Yidden locally in Riga. It's Yidden who are coming in from, in the early 20s, there was the border wasn't still sealed in the same way between the Soviet Union and Latvia, so people were able to escape and move on to go to America or whatever until 1924, until the United States put up quotas then. And then anyway, a very, very, very active person, obviously, and that's where 1927 comes along. You said about education. What happened with education was that the parliament in Latvia was around for 12 years, okay, until 1934. In 1934, there was a coup, bloodless coup in Latvia, and Ulmanis, who was the head of this right-wing nationalist Latvian peasant farmers party, he took control and became the dictator of Latvia, and there was no parliament after that. Agudas Yisrael changed its name to Machane Yisrael, right? Because Agudas Yisrael had to close down because it was a political party, so it changed its name to Machane Yisrael. Just in terms of,
that's where the name comes from.
I'm sure of it. Yeah, and there was a Merkez Linyani Chinuch there. Whatever, just a lot of the things you see
that
a lot
name,
of
Merkez Linyani Chinuch.
Yeah. That published paperwork and once ago. A lot of the things that you see that were established in America were already being formed. Were already formed in Latvia during that time.
Interesting.
So Marcha Dubin after 1934 had no government position,
right?
But he had a lot of influence, and this was already also a lot of people didn't like because, meaning his opponents, left-wing Jews, got very nervous about the fact that he had a good relationship with Ulmanis, and Ulmanis said, "Okay, you represent the Jews."
He wasn't even elected, right?
No, he wasn't elected. He put Chadakov as the head of the Jewish desk at the Ministry of Education. So the person who was in charge of Jewish education in Latvia, in the Latvian Ministry of Education, was Chadakov under Marcha Dubin.
And Rabbi Chadakov has a similar history that he's really from Russia.
Right.
Yeah.
He's from those Jews who come from right. Everyone thinks he's a German. He went through educational. He went through Torah v'derech eretz. Like they're yeah, but like
he's a Lubavitcher from Russia.
Yeah. He's a Russian Jew. He's not German.
Yeah.
But they had a lot of that influence even in the Fruma Meistes in
Riga.
In Riga, it was had a lot of like that German influence, because there were German Jews also. So German Jews and Russian Jews, and anyway, what worked there, or at least what was done there, wasn't like the regular Chassidish or whatever was going on in Russia. At least it was like more like even the Fruma school. Yeah.
Okay.
The name of the school is Torah v'Avoda. So Mordechai Dubin was now in a position of power in 1927. He's in parliament. There were two members. He has Aguda, which is associated with Agudas Yisrael, but he's a Lubavitcher. Like, he's not taking his directions from anywhere else at all, ever. And Adrab, he represented Chabad in meaning the Frierdiker Rebbe's wishes and later before and after in general Aguda conferences. He was very, very involved with the Knesset Gdolos. Like he was very involved.
Especially the Frierdiker Rebbe moves to Riga, so yeah,
for sure. But even before that, there's yes. So
he was like the Frierdiker Rebbe's representative to Agudas Yisrael also.
Yeah, like unofficial.
Unofficially.
Yeah, yes, 100%. So, and he was very influential. He was very, very a big personality. He would sit in shul. He would daven very early in shul in one of the Chabad minyanim in Riga. He would daven early in the morning. He would stay to learn a parak mishnayos with a group, and then he would go. And by the time, meaning when he was already at the end of learning, there were people already waiting for him by the shul, right, waiting for his help. Mm-hmm. And then he would walk home, and those people are walking with him. And by his house, there's more people waiting already. He would stop by his house. He would go to the office, and basically the crowd around him would continue growing. Mm-hmm. And we mentioned the Riga seaside, right? He would go there also. He went, he's a gvir. He went to the dacha also. So in the summer, from Shavuos, I saw in a newspaper that Shavuos he was already there. They mentioned him as a member, as a mispal in one of the minyanim over there in Bulduri or whatever, like in that area on the beach. And when he would come back to the city, which is it's close, like half an hour or something, in the train station, people were already waiting for him. Right there, the same thing, and they would follow him, and then he would go into ministries, and he had teams of secretaries dealing with things, and he would emphasize the person who came from abroad, meaning who came from a town, in the provinces, to help them, because this person is in Riga. It's an expense for them every single day that they're in Riga, right? So he would prioritize helping them first. But he helped a tremendous amount of people and was up, meaning working early and until the latest hours of the day. So obviously, when the Frierdiker, when this comes up, then the Frierdiker is arrested, and now Latvia. I want to see when I wrote it down. When did they sign the trade deal? I think they signed the trade deal in June 1927. The Latvians and the Soviets signed this trade deal. It had been very, very hard to negotiate, like we said, because the Russians are the Russians and the Latvians are paranoid and worried about what they're doing, like opening the door to your mortal enemy. So it took a long time, but they signed it, but it still needed to be ratified, right? They needed the parliament to vote on it. The Latvian parliament. So that's where Mordechai Dubin already played a very big role. The Frierdiker Rebbe writes that he traveled 3 times. Over that summer, he traveled 3 times to the Soviet Union, which is already like it's not a simple thing, and talking to them on that level, and it was complicated. And they also, we know that there was the German side, right? There was Mayor Hildesheimer in the Leo Beck, Oscar Cohen. And these people, and Oscar Cohen was sent as a representative of the German Jews to the Soviet Union, also as part of this effort to save the Frierdiker Rebbe. And it's very clear that Mordechai Dubin and Oscar Cohen were there. They presented themselves as being on opposing sides, that they were fighting. Each one was fighting to bring the Frierdiker Rebbe to their place. He to Berlin, he to Riga. But it's very clear from newspapers at that time, like right after the Frierdiker Rebbe was out, it's very clear that they had been
they were working together.
That they were working together through this whole time. Oscar Cohen had very deep connections. He was personally friends, I think, with Chicherin that I mentioned, who had been part of with Voikov. He because he was like from the left. He was a socialist, Pilate Tzia, whatever. He had been a member, like a social democrat member of the parliament in.
So what was their interest in helping the Frierdiker Rebbe?
They're helping the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Hildesheimer. They later on they became very involved with the Matzah campaign, Peites. They became very, very involved, very helpful. They want to help Eden. It's not a shock that
I'm saying the
they didn't want to help.
There's a whole history.
Why him? I don't know. The truth is, it's something.
It's something. We actually wrote about it in the Hair recently.
Yeah.
But the Pilate scene, they were fighting the Bachar and Lubavitch. They were trying to get people. And there's a whole story.
Right.
They attacked the Frierdiker Rebbe physically.
Right.
Yeah, I guess it was a different time.
Different place. Meaning these are the Russians, these are Germans. Whatever. Like I think the Russian branches of all these movements were always much more violently anti-religious and violently because it was whatever.
I can imagine some of the Pilate scene maybe became Yefsektia.
For sure, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Okay.
Yeah. So the trade deal was continuing at this time, and Mordechai Dubin traveled to Russia.
It needs a vote now, right? It needs a vote in the parliament.
And over that summer, it was impressed on the Soviets, and Mordechai Dubin said this very, very clearly, that you're asking something from me. It was the votes were very, meaning who was for what. The votes aligned in the parliament were very obviously very split. You want these votes from me, and I'm asking you for one thing. I'm asking you for the rabbi. I want this rabbi, and I want him to come. I want him to what's going. You're going to give him. You're going to allow him to go to Berlin, and we're going to be mortally offended. And so this was a big deal that was happening the entire time. And the bottom line is that they wanted this trade deal, and that's back to, again, they wanted this trade deal because there's this capitalist encirclement. You have to go back to that whole era of what's going on. So this is an important piece to them, to stick it to the West side, to peel the Latvians away from the West. And by the way, all these things actually worked a little bit. The British were not happy with the Latvian trade deal, right? We already mentioned the Baltic states within themselves were not happy. So this whole sowing discord amongst them worked. And that's really the main piece of why the Soviets want and need this, is because it fits into their worldview, and therefore they are going to sign this trade deal because they're really getting something much bigger than trade and some goods that from a country the size of West Virginia. They don't. That doesn't matter. The Soviet Union's it's an empire at the end of the day. So, but there's a lot of things, and it's Soviet ideology itself that is dictating what's happening. That's what's so interesting, is that they see capitalist encirclement, and they see trade deal, and they see we are going to peel them off, and we're gonna go after Latvia in this way, because you have to do this. Meaning, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but they see all of this, and it's worth it for us to expel this rabbi, or to release this rabbi in order to make this happen.
Soviets want it.
They wanted it, and you see the extent of how high this went just by the people. On the second day of Rosh Hashanah, there was a meeting of this Chicherin, of Litvinov, of Rothstein, a bunch of people, the ambassador, the Soviet ambassador to Latvia was there, who came in from Riga to go tell them how important this whole thing was, right? So that meeting is where they decided that the Frierdiker Rebbe can go, and if I'm not mistaken, that's when they decided also because the last sticking point was his family, and the library. Right, the 10,000 Sfarim, whatever the Frierdiker Rebbe's library. They wanted to let only the Frierdiker Rebbe out himself, which obviously was not going to work without his family.
And the Frierdiker Rebbe insisted that his
family and the library,
and also that the Rebbe, which wasn't part of the family, it should be part of it also.
Wasn't part of the family, and he insisted. Right, that's the famous story. Yeah, like a son-in-law like this you can't find anywhere else.
Right.
So 100%. And the Rebbe was like hiding out during that time in I think what's his name? Yashav Cohen, the chief rabbi
of Israel.
Was he of Israel, of Haifa? Was he at some point of the whole Israel? I don't remember.
Maybe not, but yeah, okay.
His family. There was somebody who was like the Rebbe was staying in their house in a during this period. It seemed like the Rebbe was laying low there in Lida or Luda or something like that. No, not
this is before.
The Frierdiker Rebbe did go to, and Mordechai Dubin was in Malachivka also during that time. Malachivka, for sure, there's a period where Mordechai Dubin was there, and I don't know if convincing is the right word, but was making the case to the Frierdiker Rebbe that it's going to be more effective to leave. And again, part of the reason why it would be more effective for the Frierdiker Rebbe to leave. First of all, the circumstances were to change, and very, very quickly, right? After this becomes more exponentially more dangerous, moving forward. And then the other piece is that
in general, you weren't allowed to emigrate.
No, you're not allowed to leave.
No one's allowed to leave.
No, for sure not. Meaning you can get whatever, there was special permission, but the local KGB in Leningrad was out for blood because they had done this and they'd been overruled and whatever, so they were
going to arrest the Frierdiker Rebbe again.
Yeah, that's basically that's what was going on. So the bottom line is that for the function of the Frierdiker Rebbe's work in the Soviet Union, the option was to go. And he went to Riga. And so he came to Riga, the Frierdiker Rebbe. He was escorted then by Mordechai Dubin was there, right? They left Isser Chag.
Oh, you're jumping ahead. So Frierdiker Rebbe is released. Yud Beis Tammuz. Over the next summer, 6 weeks, the Frierdiker Rebbe was in Malachivka. Very few people were allowed to go there, right? I think there's like eyewitness accounts from Falakan, whatever. There's very, very few people though that were allowed to go there. The Rebbetzin was there, like our Rebbetzin, and the Rebbe was there, meaning visited there. Mordechai Dubin came there, but there were very, very few people. People were ordered not to go there. This was specifically to be, undercover. I think during that time, the Frierdiker Rebbe went to Rostov for the last time. He went to the Eil.
Yeah, and then already Tishrei was the last Tishrei in the Soviet Union. So you remember the second day of Rosh Hashanah was when this decision was made, and then I think they told people in Leningrad not to, meaning they said that Chassidim shouldn't come in for Tishrei, but I think people did and continue, like more and more. I think a lot of
Chassidim had B'seres Nefesh to come
right
for Simchas Torah and for Sukkot to the Frierdiker Rebbe because the word got out that the Frierdiker Rebbe was leaving Russia shortly afterwards, and that was the last opportunity.
Right, and the Rebbe was not there. The Rebbe was by his parents, and
because the Rebbe was also leaving Russia.
He left later though. The Rebbe left like a week or two later.
In the same period, but I think that was the last time the Rebbe was spending time with his parents.
Yeah, 100%. Then he came. He left the Frierdiker Rebbe and the family. Everything. There's a whole right. There was a lot of people on the train. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote a letter on the train to the Chassidim left behind in Russia.
It's a lot of stories. There's a story about Chaim Altes.
And they went until they got off. I think they got off like before. I mean, Rabbanim in Chassidim in Russia, a group of them at least, got off before the train continued on. And Mordechai Dubin and the family, whatever, everybody was there until they came to Riga, and there was a big celebration. I think it was Friday morning. I think it was Erev Shabbos that the Frierdiker Rebbe came, Isser Chag, and arrived
the day after he left.
Yeah,
Okay.
right away, and he arrived in Riga, and the vote to ratify the Latvian trade deal took place a week later. Or 5 days later, even 4 days later, or something like that. There was a midnight vote, which, if you look at the votes were 52 to 45 with a few abstentions. But so the Mordechai Dubin's 2 votes
Broke the vote.
Meaning, yeah, you see, it was 52 that passed it.
It needed.
And the
votes.
newspapers at that time in Latvia, they make reference to this frequently. That saying, we're running a crazy. They had kindness about how the political system in Latvia, that little political parties have so much control. It's like one of these places, and later on they use this as an excuse, like the dictator used this as not this case in particular, but like the kind of the broken, that it was very hard to get things done because all these little parties,
parliamentary systems. That's how it works.
Yeah,
right?
but then some. Yeah. So they said, like Mordechai Dubin, he was against the trade deal, and then Mitamol, he gets the Lamach Rebbe, and now he's for it. So I don't know what he was portraying. To the I mean, that tells you that he was now we're looking at it, and he had this plan the entire time, but it appears that he publicly in Latvia for weeks or for months even was portraying himself as an opponent to the deal, because I saw already 2 different news articles referencing this bit, and they're like, this is ridiculous. Okay, very good. We're happy that I think one of them goes like, we're happy that the Lamach Rebbe is here and free, but like you can't run a country like this, like, because you got the Lamach Rebbe, so now we're going to change our whole, make this massive change, which is like almost rapprochement with the Soviet Union, right? Like these are they're and their paranoia wasn't false, right? The Russians marched in within 12, 13 years of this.
It took over Riga.
Took over the entire Latvia, yeah, all the Baltics, but they took over. So it's not like they were saying something crazy. Not that the trade deal changed anything, but that's their fears were warranted.
And sadly, Mordechai Dubin, the Russians got to Mordechai Dubin himself.
So that was later. That was later. Okay, so the Frierdiker Rebbe came to Riga. He was in Riga during this time. The trade deal passed. So anyway, just to finish off on this piece. Now you look at the Sikha where the Rebbe is saying that it's melubish and tava. The ness of what you see, Gimel Tammuz in particular. You see all these and the this entire miracle is happening within the world of communism in a very, very real way. It's the law. It's by their own logic that it takes place. The Rebbe uses even a lashon like that the teva agrees kaviyachol to what's. That's what you see, and I think that's the most amazing thing that you're able to pull out when you look at it in the broader context. When you read up, you see it coming through in a very real way. I want to add one thing that, in general, it's like we learned about these stories about the Soviet Union, about Mr. Nefesh in Russia and the Soviet Union, what Chassidim did. So at first it's like a can't play. Right? That's what you're told. You're told, here's the good guys, here are the bad guys. They were arrested. Why? They were arrested because they were chassidim of the Rebbeim, and they knew. No. Okay, this is the way it is. We have camp plays like this, but it's like rah. So then you get a little older, and you go, wait a second. No, and there's like a cynical line of they were speculation, right? What did they get arrested for? Speculation. I don't do with the different. Then you're like, oh, so
what does that mean? Speculation.
Speculation, like some kind of economic crimes, or whatever. That
okay.
Obviously everyone is involved with economic crimes. If you're making a living for your family, but like kilu, that's the reason why Chassidim were gone after, were hunted down in the Soviet Union. So then you look at that. You're like a little older and you're a little more mature, and you're like, oh, so it wasn't such a big deal. Meaning, whatever, okay, it's nice, but it's not such a big deal. And then I think what I find is that you go a little bit further, you're like, no, it was right in the first place.
Right.
And much more so than you can ever imagine. That when the Rebbe brings out a detail, it's not just a nice little, no, it's real and true on many, many, many different levels. And okay, you have to do the work of putting all those pieces together. But I was reading Stephen Kotkin's book on Stalin, and like the whole piece on this period, right? The last, I don't know, 60 pages, 80 pages of the book, something like that, are specifically about this period, are at this time. It's my volume is look, all noted down, all because I already see what's going on vis-a-vis Yud Beis Tammuz. And by the way, even in the bigger picture, in terms of like we're talking about this trade deal and whatever, the Frierdiker Rebbe left the Soviet Union in October of 1927. Stalin consolidated power, finished consolidating power, same time, the same exact time. The front page of the Riga Freimargen, the newspaper in Riga, which has a picture of the Frierdiker Rebbe and says he came and we're gonna have a special report and whatever. That same thing has an item about Trotsky and Zinoviev, these Jewish whatever, but like a kind of independent power bases of independent of Stalin on the Central Committee in the Communist Party in the Soviet Union were expelled from the Central Committee. That's already the beginning of the end of any opposition to Stalin in the Soviet Union. And that's already the beginning of the end of, meaning we're now entering a new tkufa. So, you can say, black and white, that this period of 1927, when the Frierdiker Rebbe leaves the Soviet Union, a new period of Soviet history begins. Not just from our perspective, from objective Soviet perspective of the history. And what I believe, what I think, and why I see, the way that the prism that I see it through is I don't know which one is more important. Meaning, I think those events are happening around our events, right? It's not that there's events going on and our events are somewhere circling nearby, right? We're like somehow impacted a little bit by the waves. No, the history. This is the main thrust of history. What happened to the Frierdiker Rebbe? What's going on? This trade deal. That
you're saying that's our outlook, or that's like
that's the way I see it. Meaning outlook. I don't know. It's not like it's not. It's just that's the way that I personally see it. And you see when you start looking at it in that way, you see all these other pieces exactly. Like Stalin consolidates power when then it's like to the day. That's tremendous, and then move on, whatever, and then goes on, and there's more chapters that continue, and all that continues. I can make the same argument about 1950, 1951, whatever. That there's a new tkufa there as well, 100%. Whatever, it's for a different conversation. But like that's what's anyway. So the can't play version. Maybe it's a little bit sometimes unsophisticated the way we say it, but if you look at the Soviet charging documents, they're amazing. There's Chassidim being charged with having a picture of the Frierdiker Rebbe. That's black and white. You have that. I wrote an article last year, 2 years ago. I published and I translated a memo to Abakumov, who's the head of the KGB. Right? Abakumov. This is 1949, 1950. Oh, it's detailing the Tzaddik Schneerson is New York and the Chassidim tried crossing the border and whatever, but it's not being written from one KGB man to another. It's not within a case file, right? Case files, everyone has a case file. Like when if you're arrested, and there's hundreds of pages on you. Fine, great. No, this is to the head of the KGB in Moscow, who's reporting directly to Stalin, and it's a whole detail. It's a detailed memo of or whatever, I don't know, 4 Chassidim tried crossing the border and got arrested. And Moshe Greenberg, that group of people tried crossing into Romania. Why? Lepkivker, eunuch.
So it wasn't four. The communists didn't look at it as four people.
No, they see it as they see it as something. They didn't come to Gan Yisrael and see it like, oh, it's important. No, they see it in this way on their own. Mm-hmm. But by the way, these guys all got 25 years, meaning in that period, they got 25 years, 25-year sentences, which was at that time the highest sentence in the Soviet Union. So that's the fact that they're looking at like that. And so when because that's the bottom line, that Chassidim are seen as Jews are the enemy. Chassidim are seen as an organization, as a counter-revolutionary organization that's fighting to take us down, and the Rebbe is seen as the head of this counter-revolution. And besides for the fact that they believe that to be true, which means, at least on their end, it's true, right? So that on our end, it's true as well. Meaning, you see it also. Okay, so we're not there to actively take apart the Soviet Union, but if you're a Yid and you do Torah mitzvahs in the Soviet Union, then meaning it's implicit over there in like Lag B'Omer Tavshin Mem where they were talking about it. It's like it's implicit that the whole thing is going to fall because of what the power that you have to do it. Our goal is not democracy. Our goal is Torah mitzvahs, but through Torah mitzvahs, you're destroying. Anyway, so that I think you see that in the story of Yud Beis Tammuz, and you see that in the trajectory. And I think that's an amazing. It's an amazing thing when you open your eyes to be able to look at it that way.
And it gives us a deeper understanding in the letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote, that the Rebbe quotes probably every Yud Beis Tammuz. That
right.
Lo Yasi Bilvad Gal HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not only was I freed,
right,
but Kol Machav V'Tereseinu HaKadesha, Chol Shemrei Mitzvah, Chol Asher B'Shem Yisrael Yechuna. Every single Yid has a part in the miracle of Yud Beis Tammuz, that it's not just the Frierdiker Rebbe's personal imprisonment. So the way I think having this informative and historical background and understanding of it really helps us understand these words, how Yud Beis Tammuz is a Yom Tiv for sure for all Chassidim, but for Klal Yisrael.
100%. Yeah. 100%. Because when the Rebbeim are looking at something, when the Frierdiker Rebbe is writing something, when the Rebbe is referring to it, there's no two separations. There's no two different worlds. There's one world. The Rebbe knows. The Rebbe mentions Voikov, the ambassador. Derech Agav, he just mentions him here and there. I don't think it's very commonly brought up, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not But like, I don't think it's not like regularly always brought up. But there's a lot of these asides where the Rebbe mentions. It's coming with all of that knowledge and knowing what it all means and so there's layers to all of it, and the Rebbe means all of them. It's not Torah is one thing and the other. No, this is all Torah. Mm-hmm. So that's the when you see all those other parts, you're able to see now that literally every element of the story is exactly as the Rebbe said it, which is what? A nes melubish in teva. Which I guess is the right. Gimel Tammuz, Yud Beis Tammuz is the Schalt de Gula, so that's l'chera also continues on. This entire thing that everything happens within Teva is begins there and continues to our day.
Amazing. Okay, thank you very much. Very very geschmack and informative, and I'm sure many people will enjoy it.
Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Okay, Hatzlacha Rabba.